Welcome back to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. I'm Jonathan Green, and this is episode 13, 5 Pro Tips to Help You Become a Better Landlord. I know you need this. Everybody needs this. Some of this is going to be a little multifamily friendly, but a lot of this is just tips that I can give you to help you be a more mindful landlord. I know the whole point of getting into real estate investing is to make money, but when you're making money as a landlord, you're a caretaker for the tenants. The tenants are a caretaker for your property. And these 5 pro tips, maybe they won't net you the best cash flow over the long term, although they might help with that. They're going to create better tenant relationships. And in my mind, as a 30-year veteran of real estate investing, I just want to have it be as passive as possible. I don't think that real estate investing is really passive, especially not landlording. But if you're doing your upkeep correctly and you set up your properties right and you treat your tenants right, you're just going to get a lot less calls. And that's just what I want. I want happy tenants and less calls. So I'm going to give it to you before I get started. I appreciate you listening to this podcast. I know we're still new. We did get a bunch of new listeners after my second appearance on the Bigger Pockets podcast. That was episode 667 that I was just on. So I appreciate having some new listeners in the box. If you haven't listened to the old episodes, go back, have a listen. There's a lot of information. We've had a lot of guests. These last 2 episodes are just me, but we're bringing in the guests hot coming soon. But I like to do these one-offs because these are my way. Last episode, episode 12, was a masterclass on off-market seller dialogues. And these are pro tips to help you become a better landlord. These are high-end tips based on my experience, and I hope they're helpful to you. Let's get into it right away. Let's start with number one. This seems obvious in this technologically friendly age: online rent payment. We have a relationship with a company called Azibo, Azibo. We don't get paid for it. The link will be down below. But any online payment portal is going to make your job as a landlord easier. It's also going to make it much easier on the tenant if the tenant is excited about paying their rent, which I guess nobody ever really is. But that's the whole thing. You want to streamline the process as much as possible so it's just less calls, less hassle, less follow up. The reason why I personally like all forms of online rent payments, although there is a glitch I will explain, they will just process the payment out of the bank account or credit card at the time that it's due. It will also automatically process a late fee. The only issue that comes up is the business days and when the rent is due. So it's really on the tenant to figure out when to pay. You don't want people always paying 5 days late. If they get a late charge, sure, can you reverse it? But I'd rather not have to do that. But I just feel like if you're not doing online rent payment, you're probably not tracking your taxes well and you're not having your expenses tracked well. If you can keep it all in an online portal, make sure that the rents are there. It's going to be much easier at the end of the year to just generate a report on the rents paid. If you're going to sell your multifamily property later, as we work with tons and tons on my team of house hackers and investors, when we get the mom and pop owned multifamilies, those records are not great, if any. So if you can just print out the recording of all of your renters' on-time payments, it's much easier to sell an occupied multifamily to another investor that way because you have documented payments. And that's what we want when we're buying. We want documented payments to know that if we're going to keep these tenants, that they've been paying their rent and that they're reliable and that that's a good spend. It's a good spend for us to buy, and we know that the rents are supported by on-time prompt payments for 2 years or 1 year or 3 years or whatever. So that's why I believe these things are important. I don't believe in automation for everything, but I really feel like this is important as a landlord. If you're still going to collect your rent, what are you doing? Seriously, why are you going to collect your rent? Maybe you're going to tell me it's because you want to check up on the apartment. That is fine if you're checking up on your units, but you should do that on a scheduled visit so they know that you're coming, they make it clean, and that they know they can rely on you coming in and not trying to sneak in. Because if you're sneaking in and you don't trust your tenants, you're already in a bad situation. I know. There's all sorts of tenants out there. You never know what's going to happen, but online rent payment is number one to help you. It seems obvious to me, but I think it's just the easiest way. And you'd be shocked at how many people are not collecting rent via an online portal. I don't know why. If you're taking it in cash, you still need to claim that. Someone's going to find out eventually. That's number one, online rent payment. I think that it's super helpful. It streamlines everything for you. Number two, I talked about a little in last week's episode. It's exterior upkeep. This is one thing that really is a pet peeve of mine. It's when landlords are annoyed at their tenants not taking care of their units, maybe letting mold build up in the bathroom, not clean kitchens, leaving garbage out. And then you look at the exterior of the property and the gutters are hanging down. There's window panes that don't look great. It hasn't been power washed in 10 years. If you're a landlord and you don't keep the exterior of your building looking nice, or the side or the back, why do you think that your tenants are going to have the same want to keep the property updated on the inside? Maybe if it is the same, they're going to be following your lead. And if their units are messy or unkempt, maybe it's because the exterior of yours is. And so if you're the owner and you're going to rent space to the tenants, and you're responsible as an owner for the common areas, the areas that are shared by the tenants, that's your responsibility. You can't expect tenants to keep up their units nicely if you don't do anything on the exterior. And I can tell you from years of dealing with tenants, a lot of times the tenants will say, "You're not doing your part. I don't like the way it looks. So we've just given up." I don't know if those things are really true, because I would still keep my unit up. That's me. But it just makes sense to say, how can you expect a tenant to do what you are not doing as a landlord? I just think that's an indication. If you treat the property well, it's more likely that your tenants will treat the property well. Remember, they're going to be the caretaker of your unit. You're the caretaker of the overall building, and you have to show them the way to do it the right way. So again, number one is online rent payments. Number two, exterior upkeep. Let's get to number three, laundry and storage. Gotta love the basements. This applies a lot to multifamily, these next two that I'm talking about, but they also apply to single family condo rentals. Where is your laundry? At a condo, usually it's going to be in a shared spot, unless you have in-unit laundry, which is fantastic. But then you do need to be careful of where your in-unit laundry is in a single family, not necessarily more in a condo where you could be above somebody, because those can leak, the hoses can break, water can become an issue for those below you. So we always recommend, in a multifamily, obviously you want to keep them in the basement just for safety purposes, so one unit doesn't ruin other units. Ideally, if you have a two family, you should have two washers and two dryers. That, of course, isn't going to work for everybody. Some people are going to have just one washer and one dryer. If you have one washer and one dryer and you have two different sets of tenants, you need to create a schedule. And I think this is, again, another unsung part of landlording, because maybe you feel like you don't want to tell people what to do. They can work it out themselves. No, no. Don't let the two tenants ever work out something themselves, because when they don't, they're only going to call you. And once they start fighting, they're never going to stop fighting ever. Then all the things that I'm going to talk to in number four are going to come up. All the things that I'm going to talk to in storage part of this are going to come up. So it's your job as a landlord, if you don't have a one washer and one dryer for each tenant, that you create a schedule: Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday for one, and that, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday for one, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday for another, and then Sundays they switch off. And you post the schedule in the laundry room so it's very clear. And really, it's just one day. Nobody's going to really have to fight with that. Eventually, they may be able to switch here and there, but it shouldn't be necessary. You want them to stick to the days. Are you going to go and police that? No. But you're going to have way less calls if you have a schedule than if you don't. They're always going to be complaining about each other. Ideally, is it great when you have two tenants and they get along? Yeah, it's fantastic. But what if you have a four family? Everyone's not getting along. I mean, let's be hopeful, but come on. So you have four family, you have two washers and two dryers, better have a schedule. You're just trying to reduce the amount of calls that you get, or else you become more of a babysitter and less of a landlord. Your job as a landlord is to make the place as nice as possible for the price. You don't have to overdo it with crazy amenities. You're not dropping flat screen TVs in for free. You're just providing basic necessities, which I believe is laundry. Because if you don't have laundry, that's just, you're not going to be getting as much rent. Tenants have to figure out where to go to do their laundry. Are there issues with laundry? Sure. I talked about it a little bit in last week's episode, but you do have to watch the water intake, and you do have to decide if you're going to have coins or card or just charge for water and have regular washing machines. I would go for cards myself, which they have to, get charged up with money. And personally, if I could, I would have a washer dryer for each unit in the building, just for ease of use, so they feel like they have their own space. The more that you give each tenant their own space, which is going to include what we're going to get to next in storage, which is part of number 3, they feel like it's more of a home. So the more stuff that you can give them that makes it feel like home, the more they're going to treat it like home. And that's just a better way to do it. No laundry is tough. Eventually, people are going to leave. You're going to have more turnover with no laundry for sure. That's a guarantee. Storage usually goes hand in hand with laundry because they're usually both in the basement. Um, the best units I've seen have dedicated storage for each unit where the tenant can put a lock. That is very smart. You can also charge for that. It's always for your extra up charges. It's always, do you want to put that on the rent or do you want to put it in there? Psychologically, it's two different things. If you don't put the storage onto the rent, then it looks like it's going to be a cheaper rent, but then they feel like, oh, well, now I'm renting for this and now I have to pay for storage. Can work both ways. When you do it the other way, you put the storage in on the rent, then the rent seems higher, but they get an amenity, so they're kind of more happy. But I mean, both can work. I just think you have to be clear at what you're charging for the storage. And the storage should be, if you're in a basement storage, especially where I am in New Jersey, you do want to make sure that you provide a little bit of raised something. You want to be like a few inches off the ground just in case there's a water issue that comes into town. So even if I did have dedicated storage, I'd still do the tenants a favor and kind of build a platform so it's a little bit off the ground just in case. Again, the storages should all be labeled. They should have a way that they can put on their own lock with their own key that you do not have access to. And of course, it should be stored at your own risk, so you're not liable for it. But I think having laundry and even a schedule or a separate unit and storage in the basement, of course, it's going to net you more rent. Probably going to eventually net you better tenants because more amenities, better tenants, more appreciative, feels like home more. So that's number 3. That's laundry and storage. Number 4 is parking and backyard. These are definitely things that I don't think that multifamily owners think about in the beginning. But you're not going to get more complaints other than, I think, probably pests. Pests and noise are like at the top. Pests meaning like whatever, rodents or bugs, and noise from other tenants. Those are kind of in there. But things that you can control is parking and backyard. And the reason these are so important is tenants leave at different times. Everybody works a different schedule. It really depends on what your parking looks like. If you have side-by-side parking, I would be labeling those unit 1, unit 2, etc. However that works. The reason you do this is so they just always park in the same spot and they know where to go. If not, you get to the issue if you have just a one-car driveway type of situation and people have to back in and back out, you're going to need to create a schedule for that to help them out as well. Why? Because they're going to fight with each other. And when they fight with each other, guess who's getting the call? You. Maybe the police sometimes, but more likely you, because they can't agree and there's no schedule and they don't know what to do. A single car width driveway is very tough for a multifamily. Obviously, if you're renting a single family home, that person who's renting it or people are going to figure out and work it out on their own. But when you get to multifamily, you need to kind of be someone in the middle, setting the rules, having ground rules. And that's, again, it's always important to have kind of a rule book for the property to make sure everybody's on the same page about what the expectations are. That also gives you more leverage later if you have to try to get an eviction going. In tandem with parking, because I believe parking spaces should always be marked. And again, you can upcharge for the parking in a lot of areas as well. Is the backyard. This pro tip I've been giving for so many years, and I still, almost every multifamily I go to see, I don't see this done. If you have a two family and both units have the same access to the backyard, meaning they both have walkout access at some point, either via stairs or a side entry, that backyard should have a fence down the middle. I don't even care if you don't have a fence on the outside. I just want you to separate the yards so each person has the same amount of space in the yard. I would do the same for a four family. I think it's more important to give people their own little private space in the backyard if you can, because it's just going to create better relationships. Each person will know this is my space. Will there still be noise issues? Yes, for sure. That's always a constant problem as a landlord. But if each person has their own space, again, it's much less likely that they're going to argue about who's there. If two people plan a party at the same time and it's a shared backyard, that's going to be a problem. You're going to get the phone call. Remember, your job as a landlord, again, is to take care of your tenants, take care of the building, but also get as few calls as possible. Your job is to make sure they know the reasons to call me are water or fire. The rest, try to work out. If you can't work something out, definitely call me, because you don't want to have an issue that you need to run down there for because people are actually fighting. So parking and backyard, your job is to separate them, label them, and make sure that each of your tenants feels that they have the exact same share, or if one unit's bigger, that the share is appropriate to the size of the units. So before we get to number 5, let's do a little review. 1 is online rent payment. 2 is exterior upkeep. 3, laundry and storage. Number 4, parking and backyard. And these are 4 out of the 5 tips. These are pro tips to help you become a better landlord. Look, this podcast, Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing, is about the mindful approach to real estate investing. And this is actually about the mindful approach to landlording. I know there's things called slumlords out there, and not everybody gets into it for the right reasons. And to be honest, it's pretty hard to be a landlord. You don't always get the best tenants. Sometimes you just think it's going to be easier and you don't know what to do. You're inexperienced, so you make some errors on doing that. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong as a landlord, but I really think if you think holistically about what you want to do, again, they're going to take care of the units, but how can you expect them to take the best care of the units if you don't take the best care of them and the building? That doesn't mean you have to be like my dad, who I would come home in the summers and I would do rent collection for him. And I would look at the sheet and there would be like 5 unmarked boxes on each month. And I said, well, what is this? Where are all the check marks? And he said, oh, well, they're like 4 months behind. They're 5 months behind. My dad was a nice guy. He was too nice, but I learned about what not to do in landlording, some from him. And then I also learned how to be a good landlord for stuff that he did. He did like to make some cheap fixes. My sister knows that. But hey, it was a different time. Now I really feel like you want to get your units up and running, make them fully functional, and make sure that your tenants are well taken care of. I have a few other tips for you as I get to number 5. It's kind of be an etc., a catch-all, some things that I think could work depending on where you're doing it. If you have a high-end multifamily, multiple units, I would consider doing Wi-Fi. Maybe it's a little bit easier in a 2-family where there's not so much bandwidth going around. But if you get quantum, it's not going to be that expensive if you have that and then let people make their own private networks off of that. I don't think you'll have too many issues with that. I mean, is it an issue? Because then when the internet goes out, they're going to call you. Yes, that's one issue to think of. But I'm always trying to think of amenities that I think will help people be more productive, and then also, again, make it feel more like home, and also take care of the unit because you want to give them a few amenities. Please don't, as this we're in the etc. section, please don't rent apartments or units without refrigerators or appliances. You're just asking for trouble. If you don't have a refrigerator because it's too expensive and you don't want to pay for it, someone's going to bring a refrigerator in. And if they're bringing the refrigerator in by themselves or with a friend, they're going to scratch the floor, your floor. It's not their floor. You're going to try to charge them for that. And then they're going to say, well, we didn't want to spend $500 to get someone to move a refrigerator in. And they're a renter. They're not buying a refrigerator. Maybe they are, but if they are, then they're going to take it with them. And you're going to run into the same problem again. Please put all the appliances in. That would be a great thing to do. Um, if you're thinking amenities, there's a lot of other different things that you can do. If we go back to the scheduling, I think that's really important. I'm going to give you one extra side pro tip. If I were a landlord and I really liked my tenants, I wouldn't do this for like all of them, but I would throw a once a year party or like mini event. If they have kids, you just bring over like whatever petting zoo or something. Do something nice once a year. Is it great? What do you give, like a $25 off at the holidays? Yay. That's not really showing much. That's kind of easy to do. I would do something once a year, throw them a barbecue, bring a food truck, do something that I think is outside of what other landlords are doing. The reason why you do this is because a lot of times, this is especially true for college renters. If you do a good job as a landlord, a lot of times you're not going to need to go back on the market. When they leave to buy a house, they're going to have their friends come in and rent from you, and the friends are going to know exactly how you treated them. That's the surprise of college renters. If you're smart with your college renters, you're going to be able to just get recommendations for who is coming in right after them. So, if you have any questions about this or you want to dispute things, as people like to do and sometimes in the comments on YouTube, feel free, ham it up in the comments. But like, really, the best thing to do in the comments, if you're on the YouTube portion of this podcast, ask smart questions. I like to answer smart questions. I like to help investors. That's why I created this podcast. And these tips are hopefully there to just help you become a better landlord long term. There's lots of things that you can do inside the house, outside the house. You always want to make sure it's sound. We're in the etc. portion still. Please have pest control at all times. You can't count on your tenants to be perfect with leaving food out, and a lot of multifamilies will just get pests. You always need to have pest control on quarterly, always doing it, and making sure that they alert you if there's any pests anywhere, because that can get out of hand real quick. If you have one messy tenant, that could play into the other tenants. So you need to be the one doing the the pest control for sure. A couple other things you can do. Do you do cleaning services for them? I bet you just took that same pause with me. Why would I clean their apartments for them? Well, if you ask my friend Vishal Balani, who's going to be on the podcast for sure in the near future, he's going to tell you that the reason why cleaners are so good is because they actually are eyes for you. You'll be able to get feedback from the cleaners on how clean the unit were, but you're also giving them a benefit. I guess the tenants could opt out, but I don't think, why would you opt out of somebody paying for cleaning maybe just like once a quarter? It's a nice gesture to do, and you can also get some feedback from the cleaner on anything that's wrong. One of the things is if you're just learning how to be a landlord, you don't know how to let people alert you of the things that are wrong. And then if you're kind of resistant to their first couple requests, they get resistant and they're not going to tell you. Water and fire. I'll say it over and over. If you see smoke or if you see water dripping anywhere, please call right away. Water creates mold, fire creates damage. These are the things that you need to be aware of. You want to be sure if you don't have central air, you want to make sure that you know the regulations and make sure they know how to install their window units so they don't fall. Just another thing, this is all in etc. section, a wrap up, if you will. But I hope these have been helpful. These are 5 pro tips to help you become a better landlord. And from my point of view, it's really to help you become a more mindful landlord. If you go into real estate investing just thinking it's all about the money, you're going to forget that you're caretaking for tenants. Again, they're going to take care of the unit for you, but you're going to take care of them and the overall building as a whole, which means common areas. My last etc. tip is I would try to find a place for package drop off. Look, after the pandemic, I mean, I've always ordered a bunch of packages because I just don't go to stores to buy stuff. So I use Amazon or wherever to get things delivered to my door because it's easier, groceries delivered, anything like that. If you have a multifamily, this is especially important if you have like 4 or 5 more units. You see it a lot in high end apartment complexes, but why can't you take some of the things that they do and apply it? If there's a mail room, do you have a package area so the packages are safe? Is it crazy to think that at some point you could have a separate package area for each person? I mean, that would be nice. Then, nothing would get stolen when it gets left out in the front steps. Again, that's not your fault, but is it an amenity that you could come up with? It probably is. So, those are your tips. Again, as always, I appreciate you listening to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. We're going as once a week here. We've just reached episode 13. We're coming on with more interviews soon. And as always, at the end of the podcast, I'm going to remind you that uncomfortable thing. If you like the podcast, please share it with your friends. It's pretty easy to just send the link to the podcast wherever you listen to it. If you're getting something out of it, that's awesome. We'd appreciate it if you'd leave a 5-star review. I saw someone snuck in a two-star review. I mean, feel free. Do what you want. It's, I guess, more realistic when you have one in there. It's not everybody's cup of tea. For me, if I don't like something, unless it's like I went to a restaurant and something horrendous happened, I'm probably not going to take the time to leave a poor review. But whoever left the 2-star, thanks. I'd really like to know what you didn't like. That would actually help me. But again, everything doesn't have to be everybody's cup of tea. If you think these tips that I'm giving you are all BS, feel free just not to listen. Won't hurt my feelings. And I think that's the greatest thing about podcasts. If you're not enjoying it, you're not enjoying a TV show, you're not enjoying a movie, you can just shut it off and watch something else. But if you choose to keep listening, I hope you head into wherever you listen to podcasts. Leave us a 5-star review. Send it to your friends. If you're listening to this and watching it on YouTube, hit the bell, subscribe, stay up to date. We release episodes early every Wednesday morning. This has been episode 13, 5 pro tips to help you become a better landlord. I'm Jonathan Green. See you next week.